Hi, I'm Charlie, I'm back, and welcome back to the Hismario123 Show. Have you ever wondered how Metroid Dread was developed? Metroid Dread was the first Metroid 2D platformer since Metroid Fusion on the Game Boy Advance in 2002, with the idea of another Metroid 2D game seemingly being the biggest rumor there was after Metroid Fusion, with the idea of the next one seeming like a completely dead idea, never to happen, ever. But there's a whole backstory to Metroid Dread, something that I don't think many of you know. In 2004, the first Metroid received a remake on the Game Boy Advance. A remake titled Zero Mission. This used the same engine as Metroid Fusion, the earlier original Metroid game that released on the Game Boy Advance. After the release of Zero Mission, rumors started to appear saying that Nintendo were working on a brand new 2D Metroid game, a follow-up to Fusion. However, this was never set in stone until a June 2005 article from Game Informer saying that Nintendo were working on a new 2D Metroid game called Metroid Dread. Yeah, this game was in development that early on. Later that year, in one of those, country-specific Nintendo magazines, not Nintendo Power, it was revealed that Metroid Dread was in development for the Nintendo DS, the new and upcoming console coming straight from Nintendo. Or it was out by now, I don't know. The DS also had an original Metroid game, as many of you would know, called Metroid Prime Hunters, which would make Metroid Dread the second Metroid game on the Nintendo DS. Having two Metroid games on the same platform at this point in time was a very uncommon thing, with the Game Boy Advance being the first console to ever do such a thing. Obviously the GameCube went on to do that, the Wii did that, the Switch, the Wii U didn't though. But just as this rumor and announcement started, it was dead, and no one ever heard about Metroid Dread ever again. Until 2007, when a little game you may have heard of called Metroid Prime 3 Corruption came out. When exploring Valhalla in the game, there's actually a secret message that you can decode. And this secret message says, Experiment Status Report Update. The Metroid Project Dread is nearing the final stages of completion. Is this it? Is Metroid Dread coming out after Metroid Prime 3 Corruption? Could this be the next Metroid game in the series, even though there's like 5 games that take place in between this game and Metroid Dread? No. If you scan it again, it says that the Metroid Dread thing was unsuccessful. The development or whatever was unsuccessful, which makes it seem like Metroid Dread was cancelled. Years moved on, Metroid Other M came out. I'm sure some people liked it, and it seemed as if Metroid Dread was just a distant memory. So why did no one move on? Why did we still believe in Metroid Dread? Why did we think that Metroid Dread was coming out? Is Metroid Dread coming out? E3 2009 gave everyone hope as the press was shown a brand new version of Metroid Dread. This version of the game was actually more similar to Metroid Fusion, and wasn't technically called Metroid Dread, but it was the 5th 2D Metroid Dread. It's Metroid Dread, just say it's Metroid Dread, Nintendo. That means the game is coming out. It must be coming out. Metroid Dread is finally gonna come out. No, sorry, but no. Oh, you think that's the end of the story? Oh no, this story just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Nintendo finally admitted that Metroid Dread was a game that they were working on. However, they had since put it to bed and they were not developing Metroid Dread ever again. Well, at least not currently. However, on an IGN Nintendo voice chat podcast, specifically the 75th episode, it was revealed that the story for Metroid Dread was done, and Nintendo could just make Metroid Dread. Later, the reason why the several other versions of Metroid Dread were cancelled was revealed. It was that Yoshio Sakamoto, the director of many Metroid games, and actually worked on the original Donkey Kong game, said that the consoles that they were developing Metroid Dread for were simply not powerful enough to fit their plans for Metroid Dread. Which, you know what? That's fair enough. The Metroid series was dead. Hey, we got Federation Force. Suddenly, Nintendo announced a remake of Metroid 2! Metroid Samus Returns. Now look, I don't want to get into the drama of, the fan game, another Metroid 2 Remake, which was a fan remake of Metroid 2 that Nintendo took down because they were making their own remake of Metroid 2. It's this whole thing. I haven't played any version of Metroid 2, so I can't tell you which one's the better one, okay? At first, after the release of this game and doing press for this game, Nintendo said, no, we are not working on this Metroid Dread thing. This is not happening, we're just remaking Metroid 2. But something must have clicked with Nintendo, because in 2017, we got the announcement of Metroid Prime 4. And then in 2019, they restarted development of Metroid Prime 4. Can any Metroid game come out? And then nothing was heard from the Metroid series again. I mean, obviously the games were put on like the NES Classic and the SNES Classic, and were put on, you know, Switch Online and stuff like that, but it took until 2021 to get another update in the Metroid series. It was a Nintendo Direct. Text appeared on screen saying Metroid 5. And what was unveiled was Metroid Dread? This game is real? Yes, that's right, Nintendo were finally ready to release Metroid Dread, and it was revealed that this game had been in development for 4 years. Nintendo have been working on this game for a long time, as in that version of Metroid Dread. Not talking about the whole thing. Metroid Dread was finally out, and they added a few things after the game released, and finally we got our first original Metroid game since Metroid Other M? Really? Does that even count? And it seems like Metroid Prime 4 is just around the corner. I wish that were true. But that's surely going to be a story for another day, because this game is just never coming out. The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess released as a launch title on the Nintendo Wii. But this game was originally in development for the Nintendo GameCube, but because of how much work went into this game, by the time they finished it, it actually ended up releasing on the GameCube and the Wii. However, this meant that the Wii never had its own Zelda game to call its own, as this was, available on the GameCube. Well, that all changed in 2011 when on the 25th anniversary of The Legend of Zelda, they released The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. With, the 25th anniversary edition coming with an orchestra CD. I haven't listened to it. This was seen as the one last big swing for the Wii until we finally got to the most successful Nintendo console ever released, the Wii U. All this excitement at Nintendo initially started up all these concepts for what the next game in the Zelda franchise could be. This game needed to be bigger and better than the last Zelda game. This needed to be the Zelda game that redefined what Zelda meant. Maybe they changed the title considering Zelda isn't actually playable in the game to just The Legend of Link. Who knows? This game had to be the biggest and best Zelda game ever released. Bigger than Ocarina of Time, bigger than Majora's Mask, bigger than Skyward Sword, bigger than Twilight Princess. This needed to be the best thing ever. This game truly started development in 2013 with an announcement of the game in the January Nintendo Direct. And this game had one catchphrase throughout development: break the conventions of the Zelda series. They could have come up with a bit more of a catchy catchphrase, because that's what a catchphrase is, but whatever, Nintendo, do whatever you want, I'm not the boss of you. And this game was announced to be in development for the Wii U. Of course, another Zelda game was actually in development, The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds for the Nintendo 3DS. This did not help the development of this brand new Wii U Zelda game, which didn't have a title at this point in time. People just referred to it as Zelda Wii U. Funnily enough, A Link Between Worlds at one point, for the first year of its development, only had 3 people working on the game. 3 people for an entire year were the only people that worked on The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds. Of course, this split the Zelda team into many different things. The people who were working on this Wii U game were also working on the 3DS game, and more of the talent was more and more going into the 3DS game, because this was the next Zelda release. And of course, A Link Between Worlds finally came out, and then we could all go back to Zelda Wii U. They knew they wanted this game to be an open world type game, more similar to like the Elder Scrolls game, like Skyrim or Oblivion or whatever the other ones are, I don't know what they're called. Funnily enough, when actually developing this game, Nintendo made a 2D version of the game using sprites from the NES game, which means there is technically a 2D version of Zelda Wii U out there that I guess is just lost media? Like, release it, Nintendo? That would be sick. However, this game, the more and more they talked about it, the more and more it was delayed. At this point, it was announced that the title was The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Now, do you know what I'm talking about? I'm talking about Breath of the Wild, baby. It seemed like every day Nintendo were putting out some sort of statement saying, yep, Breath of the Wild, been delayed. And more it seemed like Nintendo were putting more of their efforts into this brand new console with the codename NX. See, the Wii U wasn't very successful, unlike what I said earlier. That was sarcasm. The Wii U was Nintendo's biggest failure in recent memory. Unless we're talking about, 2018 and 2019 3DS games. They're a pretty big failure. And it seemed that Nintendo had pretty much given up on the Wii U and were putting everything into the NX. And in 2015, the NX, or at least the idea that it was a thing that existed, was leaked to the public. And Nintendo had to say, hold on, we're not talking about the NX yet. Wait till 2016. 2016 rolled around. We waited quite a while for the NX to have anything to note. We found out that Breath of the Wild was coming out in 2017 now, specifically March 3rd. Eventually found that out. And that the NX possibly is coming out in 2017. Well, it took till October 2016 for them to announce the Nintendo Switch. On this random day, they just uploaded a trailer showing these games that were playable. There was seemingly Skyrim, despite the fact that the Bethesda were like, this isn't Skyrim, even though it was Skyrim. This new 3D Mario game, which, is Mario Odyssey. A port of Mario Kart 8, at least I think it was Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and, oh my god, that's The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild on the Switch, which is the NX. Does that mean Breath of the Wild is ever coming to the Wii U, or has it always just been going to the NX the entire time? It seemed at this point the Wii U would never get an original Zelda game. Well, they did. On March 3rd, 2017, the Nintendo Switch released with some bangers like 1-2 Switch, Super Bomberman R, Skylanders Imaginators, Just Dance, a 2017, and The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Here it is, in case you didn't know what it looks like. But this game also released on the Wii U on March 3rd, 2017, meaning this is a Wii U game, and it would take until The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom for the Switch to ever get an original Zelda game specifically for the console. Breath of the Wild came out and became like one of the most successful Nintendo Switch games ever, outselling Super Mario Odyssey, outselling so many other games. Won Game of the Year in 2017. This game is the biggest Nintendo Switch game ever released, and it's not even a Nintendo Switch game. Kind of embarrassing, Nintendo. Animal Crossing was one of the biggest games for the Nintendo GameCube, and to this day lives on as one of Nintendo's biggest franchises alongside Mario and Zelda. But did you know that this series didn't actually start on the GameCube, unlike what Nintendo tells you? Oh, yikes. No, it actually begins on the Nintendo 64, with a little game known as Animal Forest. I would show you, look, it's Animal Forest, but the guy who I bought this off, for some stupid reason, has half the stuff, scratched off and just put a sticker that says Animal Crossing. This is Animal Forest. Stupid reseller. I'll just put it there. I'll just put it there. I don't know if you can see it. Maybe I'll put it there. Animal Forest, baby. Now, the story of Animal Forest actually begins with the release of Yoshi's Story, or Yoshi's Story. I don't care how you pronounce it. Nobody can pronounce half the Mario characters' names correctly. You got Mario, you got Wario. Who cares? With the Nintendo 64 DD coming out very soon, which if you don't know is the Nintendo 64 disk drive that reads floppy disks, the developers of Yoshi's Story decided, hey, why don't we make a game for that? That seems like a brilliant idea. This is going to be one of the most successful Nintendo 64 things ever released, so why don't we do it? It was not one of the most successful things for the Nintendo 64. It was like the least successful thing. It didn't even release outside of Japan. See, Nintendo was stuck on this idea on using cartridges. I say was, but the Switch still uses cartridges too. The Nintendo 64, although probably the most powerful console, that was out at the time, was harder to develop because they didn't use CDs, unlike their biggest competitors, PlayStation and Sega, who have PlayStation and the Dreamcast. Do I need to spoon feed you this information? I don't know why I'm being so rude to you viewers, I'm sorry. And Animal Crossing, or Animal Forest, was to be released on the Nintendo 64 DD, until they found out that the DD was dead on arrival. That's what the D stands for. It's the Nintendo 64 dead. I need to stop going off script. No one wanted to use little floppy disk things anymore. I mean, they weren't... No one wanted to use those stupid things anymore. They want to use CDs, you know, like a normal person. And developers were just annoyed with Nintendo that they still used bloody cartridges. They were so annoyed that they knocked my tripod. When Animal Crossing, technically Animal Forest, was almost finished development, the Nintendo GameCube was almost out. So this became the third last Nintendo 64 game ever. I say this one, but I'm pointing to Yoshi. I mean this one. The one right here. I'm sure people played the Nintendo 64 version because it's really cheap to get. I got this for like $10. But the bigger version was coming very shortly. Over in the US, they were sent Animal Forest, and they had to try and figure out how do we translate this into English. And by the time, you know, Animal Forest, now called Animal Crossing, was coming to the US, it was just on the Nintendo GameCube. When chuck out the 64, who cares? And there was so much translation to do. I mean, my god, Animal Crossing games are full of text. That's not a bad thing unless it's Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival. But it does mean that there's a lot of translation to do. And Nintendo of America also saw, hey, this game is very, Japanese. So why don't we just change a few graphics, and now it's American. And this game came out on the GameCube. Now, 8 months after the Nintendo 64 version, in Japan, Nintendo actually re-released the game on the Nintendo GameCube as Animal Forest Plus. I hate Japanese GameCube cases. This version added a lot of the stuff that we now see in modern Animal Crossing for the GameCube, as it's an upgraded version of the Nintendo 64 version. It added a lot of the stuff that they didn't have time to do for the Nintendo 64 version, hence the name Animal Forest Plus. You on my page? That didn't make any sense. See, Nintendo of Japan also saw this American version of Animal Crossing and thought, hey, why don't we release that too and add e-reader support like the American one, which led to Animal Crossing E+, which led to Animal Forest E+, which is now the third version of Animal Forest in Japan. I don't have that one. I'm sorry. I can't have visual stuff for everything. You know, things cost money, right? To be honest, when I bought this one, I thought it was E+. It is not. So now I just have it. It was like $3. Makes me wonder if anyone in Japan actually ever bought all three because they liked Animal Forest so much. I'm sure there's some crazy person who's done that. It's gonna be me soon. I haven't ordered the third. I don't know why I'm saying that. That would be pretty interesting. Comment down below what you would do if you had 3 versions of Animal Crossing on the GameCube, and what you would do in each version to make it a different experience. And I'll see you next week, quackers. Tame your phone. Signing off. Like YouTubers did in like 2002. YouTube didn't exist in 2002. I don't know why I said that.